scoring 11 goals in the league alone, compared to just 847 minutes of football this season at Real Madrid, only 352 of them coming in the league, where he only managed 1 goal. Peter Roque smashed in 21 goals in 45 games in a single season at Atletico Paranaense as an 18-year-old, whereas he only scored 2 goals and played just 353 minutes of first-team football at Barcelona, resulting in him returning to Brazil with Palmeiras, age 20, after his career stalled in Catalonia. And Angelo Gabriel had already played a quite astonishing 129 games for Santos when he joined Chelsea, still aged only 18, where he didn't register a single first-team appearance, was farmed down unsuccessfully on loan to Chelsea sister club Strasbourg, and then won to Alcantara in Saudi Arabia at the age of 19. Maybe it is a coincidence that results in difficulty, as not being the best in the world when most of their players have done years, if not their entire career playing in Brazil, to quarter-final exits against France, the Netherlands, Belgium and Croatia, at 4 out of the last 5 World Cups, and a humiliating 7 of them beaten into Germany, on home side of the semis and the one tournament in which they progressed beyond the quarters, all 5 of those defeats coming against European national teams in as well noting, but whichever way you look at it, it is hard to see that the result benefited from the enormous shift in the Farmers. So what's even if they are deep in the stressful FIFA, in protecting the status quo. It is similar, I think, to the predominantly right-wing populist political parties and causes globally during roughly the same period. Coincidentally, it should be said, I'm not suggesting that the two are somehow connected, who either enjoy support or at the very least are met with an intuitively surprising lack of opposition by some of the people who are going to emotional being if/when they are elected and enacted. Whilst that might seem unusual, it is somewhat inevitable that those who benefit least from the current system are going to be the least resistant to ideas which threaten it, and, oftentimes, the most receptive to new ideas, even nowadays. Likewise, I don't think FIFA or Gianni Infantino have any interest in restoring the greatness of Brazilian football. I'm genuinely not convinced that this man plays football, but he does have a major break with UEFA, for purely cynical reasons, which it is easy to see how football fans from outside of Europe could align with, albeit with an entirely different set of motives. You see this a lot when it comes to discussions around spending in the Saudi program. There are some football fans who view Saudi investments in football, wrong everything, as posing a threat to European supremacy, and the Premier League, in particular, as the biggest and richest league in Europe, getting a taste of their own backs. I sympathise with that perspective, and especially what the Premier League has at the moment. I think that it has greatly reduced the competitiveness and excitement of the English game, and I imagine that it will harm the rules and the skills of it. If it was from the country where Premier League teams had to poach our best players, banishing them to their reserves, and stunting their development. By the same token, I don't think that Angelo Gabriel, Kai Cesar, or Galino playing in Saudi Arabia better deserves their development, or the prospects of Brazil's national team and them playing in Europe, even if it does improve their first-team opportunities because they are playing in much worse teams in what is, overall, a much lower standard of football. Nonetheless, I can sympathise with the let-it-all-crash and burn attitude. It was one of the reasons why I thought the ultimately failed version of the European Super League might actually incremental steps towards establishing a federalised de facto Super League instead, which is what we're currently seeing. Anyway, that was just a very long way of saying that I get why non-Europeans, but especially South Africans, tend to be less ardent critics of FIFA and the FIFA Club World Cup by extension. By the same token, you can see why the shifting power balance in football over the last 20 years, and that sense of injustice makes fans from outside of Europe, again, outside of the all invested in competitions like the Club World Cup that present them an opportunity to not only impress the world cup. If you speak to all the Brazilians, which I do, naturally, big culture, the idea that the importance of trophies and competitions, from least to most important, should go state, national, continental, and then worldwide, seems almost axiomatic. The Campeonato Paulista determines the destiny in Sao Paulo, a state of 45 million people, and the Club World Cup determines the best league on the entire planet, with a population of more than 8 billion people. From an English perspective, by contrast, I would personally always side with Brian Clough that the top flight league title is the most important trophy of them all, because it measures the team's talent, mentality, and consistency over the course of an entire season, unlike the knockout competition, followed by the Champions League, the FA Cup, the League Cup, and the historical case, the Club World Cup, followed by the other Super Cups, whether that be the Community Shield or the UEFA Super Cup, all three of which are often viewed as being little more than glorified records. That's just my view. A lot of people would consider the Champions League to be a bigger trophy than the Premier League, and I think that's spoken to any single different cluster. They will see as the Club World Cup to be bigger or more important than the Premier League or the Champions League, or we wouldn't consider the very notion of that even being a question to be absurd. Somewhat to my surprise on this bit, the fact that most European clubs and fans aren't especially invested in the Club World Cup doesn't seem to bother most South Americans. Normally in football, it takes two to tango. The reason that Man United versus Liverpool, Ajax versus Feyenoord, or Real Madrid versus Barcelona are such fierce derbies is because they are so competitive, and both clubs and sets of supporters are fully invested in them. The same cannot be said of PSV versus FC Eindhoven, Bayern versus 1860 Munich, or Chelsea versus Fulham, for example, despite the much closer proximity between the teams, because the emotional investment is so one-sided. The attitude of a lot of South Americans towards Europeans, who are disinterested in the Club World Cup, is one of more fool them if they don't appreciate the importance of the competition, as they see it, rather than letting it diminish or take their perspective. It should also be noted that, while so many players from South America and the rest of the world who care deeply about the Club World Cup play their club football in Europe, they carry that same attitude and approach with them, even if the supporters of the clubs involved are largely disinterested. Rafa Benitez once described how, when Inter Milan competed in the Club World Cup in 2010, some of his non-European players viewed it as the biggest game of their lives, bigger even than the Champions League final, and told him how it was the one competition that they always really loved. That Inter Milan team, they had to be British team leaders and they probably are not going to break the final. Featured 8 South Americans in the club's starting 11, only 2 Europeans, and not a single Italian. It was no wonder that they cared so much. The club themselves didn't seem to be quite as familiar with their success, but Inter signed Benitez 6 months into the club, just validated the lifting the trophy in Canada. When Benitez from Liverpool to the Club World Cup as European champions in 2005, he wasn't a single South American in the club's entire first team squad, and 12 of the 14 players who featured Reds in the final against Sao Paulo were Europeans, and as I said, they gave the exceptions. It would be fair to say that Liverpool went out and didn't care about the World Cup. There was genuine frustration when they lost the final against Sao and had 3 goals disallowed, but they were certainly not and the Inter Milan team was consistent, almost entirely in South Americans. Likewise, when Chelsea lost the 2012 Cup final, South Americans who started the club in Chelsea, so their resident families, were pictured crying in each other's arms at the game. Meanwhile, 18-year-old Chelsea youngster primarily the desire to be champions. I believe that the two Brazilians, the resident families, tried the best to make their best, and therefore were the most disappointing. And right. Chelsea, incidentally, were also managed by Rafa Benitez. This bloke bloody loves the Club World Cup. Despite the relative ambivalence towards the competition, that was the last time that a European club failed to win the FIFA Club World Cup, 13 years ago, and together with Liverpool's defeat in 2005, they are the only 2 Club World Cups the European clubs have won in the last 19 years. In some ways, it is a vicious cycle. The fact that European clubs are so dominant in the Club World Cup has made them care deeply and relatively sentimentally and if not almost guaranteed at this stage, the persistent failure of clubs from outside of Europe to knock the European champions off their perch has only made them more determined to do it next time, meaning the imbalance in terms of attitude towards the tournament has grown further still. Of course, that wasn't always the case. Before the Club World Cup was formalised in 2005, and of course the background of the champions in 2000, there was the Intercontinental, which pitted the European and South American champions up against one another over a two-leg or sometimes even three-leg competition champions required between 1960 and 1979 and a seven-leg from 1980 onwards. Before the power balance of world football became so outstanding, the Intercontinental Cup, whilst never considered more important than the European Cup from a football perspective, was at least incredibly competitive. Games like Premier League coming back from Robert last night to crush the European champions Benfica 5-1 in only the second ever Intercontinental Cup, and how they inspired Santos winning back-to-back rounds against Benfica and AC Milan, the vicious 1967 final between Celtic and Racing Club, nicknamed the Battle of Montevideo, in which 6 players were sent off in the replay, Flamengo dismantling Liverpool through the genius of Zico in 1981, and Sao Paulo upsetting Johan Cruyff's Barcelona Dream Team in 1992, were all iconic games, and indeed sporting events, which live long in the memory, in a way that, from a European perspective at least, no Club World Cup final has been. It is worth noting, speaking for myself, though I would imagine most Europeans would agree, I will just appoint myself King of the Europeans by the end of this video, I am not remotely opposed to the premise of a Club World Cup. Quite the opposite. I think the balance of power in football is far too Eurocentric. I have no desire for that to be the case just because I'm European. It doesn't benefit me at all. I literally support Hull City, and I love seeing random matchups in football. I mean, it's hard not to feel somewhat romantic about ties like River Plate versus Inter Milan, Borussia Dortmund versus Mamelodi Sundowns, and Bayern Munich versus Boca Juniors, all of which will happen during the group stage alone. A properly formatted, well thought out, and sincerely motivated Club World Cup would be one of the best things to happen to football. The gap between the premise and the reality, however, is the reason for much of the cynicism and disinterest both on my part and, again, as King of the Europeans, I can confidently confirm all 700 million plus people in Europe, including Jason Punchin, Steve Bruce, and both members of Jedward. The reality is that the massively expanded and reformatted Club World Cup hasn't been born out of a love of football, but a love of power and profit. It is well documented that FIFA have long been envious of UEFA's annual Champions League revenue, whereas FIFA themselves only currently have one major cash cow, the Men's World Cup, which is only held once every 4 years. Gianni Infantino, who previously spent 15 years at UEFA, where he oversaw the expansion of the Euros from 16 to 2014s, and helped to birth the plans for the creation of the Nations League, has been plotting a FIFA competition to rival the Champions League ever since his election as FIFA president in 2016. Much as the World Cup is the most lucrative month in all of world football, the club game is where the real money lies these days, and it is no secret that Infantino and FIFA plan to make the Club World Cup a biennial tournament in the near future, despite UEFA claiming to have received assurances that they won't. If there's one thing that you can confidently say about FIFA, it is that they always stick to their word. Oh no, that's right, isn't it? It's that they're completely full of shit. Sorry. I'm always getting those two mixed up. When you understand FIFA's motive, everything, whether that be the sudden jump to 32 teams and a month-long tournament, as opposed to a phased or staggered increase, the arbitrary qualification process, or the absurd ticketing situation, all start to make sense. Because the Club World Cup, under the new format, is only currently going to be held once every 4 years, and there is no direct qualification process as with the actual World Cup, the indirect qualification process was always likely to be a little convoluted and split opinion. With that being said, the process as FIFA has actually designed it is obviously preposterous. The 2-team per nation limit, which doesn't apply if you win the Confederation's Premier competition, and the Confederation coefficient ranking, which only considers coefficient points accrued in the Premier Confederation Cup competition, made things unnecessarily convoluted, before you even throw in Club Leon's banishment and a very late playoff, or play-in, as FIFA termed it, between Los Angeles FC and Club America to determine which team would replace them. The most controversial inclusion in the tournament, however, was the 5th additional CONCACAF spot awarded to the host nation, the United States, which wasn't based upon CONCACAF Champions League success or coefficient ranking, but rather on domestic success. LA Galaxy won the MLS Cup in 2024, the biggest trophy in American soccer, generally considered to recognise the league's champions following a playoff phase, but FIFA awarded the host spot of the 2025 Club World Cup to Inter Miami instead. Inter Miami won the 2024 Supporters' Shield, a trophy given to the regular season table toppers, which is generally considered to be only the 3rd or 4th biggest trophy on offer to MLS clubs, undoubtedly trailing both the CONCACAF Champions League and the MLS Cup, and arguably even the US Open Cup, America's equivalent of the FA Cup, depending upon who you ask. Extreme cynics, therefore, suggested that Inter Miami may have been shoehorned into the 2025 Club World Cup because of Lionel Messi, arguably the greatest footballer of all time and one of the most marketable athletes on the planet, which just so happened to be very convenient for FIFA in terms of ticket sales, broadcast deals, sponsorships, and social media engagements. And yes, that last point is, sadly, a genuine factor in FIFA's thinking. Of course, Gianni Infantino could have attempted to save face, citing some form of plausible deniability, like, I don't know, the fact that most domestic champions are determined by the league winners during the regular season, so Inter Miami's inclusion, whilst erroneous in an American context, would provide consistency ahead of future tournaments. But instead, well, FIFA didn't really attempt to deny the fact that they had just brazenly shoehorned Messi into the tournament because, well, they wanted Messi at the tournament. In fact, Infantino gave the game away even further by telling the internet screamer I Show Speed, honestly, what's going on here? The quote, Ronaldo might play for one of the teams as well at the Club World Cup. There are discussions with some clubs, so if any clubs are watching and is interested in hiring Ronaldo for the Club World Cup, who knows? Who knows? End quote. Just whoring Ronaldo out there on a live stream like he's his pet. When everyone knows, that's George Mendes' job. Infantino's comments were reported to have infuriated Ronaldo's team. They hadn't been this angry since they last heard from the Las Vegas Police Department, and Ronaldo confirmed the day after Portugal won the UEFA Nations League that he wouldn't be at the tournament. These rumoured short-term transfers, few of which actually materialised, but which were clearly encouraged by Infantino, at least in regard to his comments about Ronaldo, and the creation of a new brief end-of-season but pre-Club World Cup transfer window, which allowed deals like Trent Alexander-Arnold and Dean Huijsen to Real Madrid, or Ryan Cherki and Tijani Reinders to Man City to be completed in advance of the tournament, cast further doubts upon the integrity of the competition. N'Golo Kante, for example, it is widely rumoured at the time of recording, is expected to join Al Hilal on a short-term deal, effectively a 1-month loan, from Al Ittihad for the duration of the Club World Cup. Those ought to be a grueling set of negotiations, given that Al Hilal are owned by the Public Investment Fund, Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, whereas Al Ittihad, of course, are owned by the Public Investment Fund, Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund. And as we all know, those guys drive a hard bargain. Just ask the country's more than 6 million impoverished migrant workers from South Asia alone. Try to imagine an equivalent scenario between supposed rivals in the UEFA Champions League. Kante's Al Ittihad won the Saudi Pro League title last season, whilst Al Hilal finished second. It is the equivalent, therefore, of Arsenal loaning Man City or Chelsea Bukayo Saka for the Club World Cup, or, using a Champions League example, Spurs letting Newcastle borrow Mickey van der Ven, or Man United handing Liverpool Bruno Fernandes. That sounds absurd. Because it is. But that's because those are real clubs and competitions, or they still are for now at least. It's not just the teams who are at the Club World Cup that have raised suspicion regarding the integrity of the tournament, but also those who aren't. The Premier League, La Liga and Serie A title winners this season, Liverpool, Barcelona and Napoli, will all be absent, not having won the Champions League in the last 4 years, or amassed enough coefficient points in the Champions League during that time to qualify ahead of their domestic rivals, meaning that at least 2, if not 3 of the best teams in Europe will be absent, casting doubt upon whether the tournament, even if every team present competed it as the be-all and end-all, and not just a very lucrative glorified pre-season, the true champions of the world. By contrast, Hurrah Red Diamonds, or Hurrah Red for short, currently third in the J-League, Al Ain, who finished 5th in the UAE Premier League this season, Wydad, who finished 3rd in Morocco's top flight this season, 16 points beyond the actual title winners, Monterrey Pachuca, who finished 7th and 8th in this season's Liga MX Europe race, Fluminense, who finished 13th last season with the Brasileiro, Juventus and Chelsea, who finished 4th in Serie A this season, who finished a distant 3rd in a 3-team league, and Red Bull Salzburg, who have won the Austrian Bundesliga title in either of the last 2 seasons, will all be present. Despite shoehorning Messi and Inter Miami to the tournament, and this seems pretty relevant in the context of the overall tournament has been a major flop, although they were obviously paying tickets to this event. Internally, the broadcasting title broadcast revenue $4 billion in the Club World Cup, which would have made it the single most valuable sporting event of all time, exceeding even the actual World Cup. That would value every game, on average, at more than $60 million for broadcasters. At the start of December, 6 months out from the start of the tournament, FIFA still hadn't struck a single deal. Apple reportedly had an offer for the global rights, worth a quarter of what FIFA wanted stopped at, but even they weren't interested anymore. Reluctance of broadcasters to buy the rights to the tournament was further headed to FIFA, as sponsors were unwilling to commit to the tournament without knowing where it would be broadcast, and with a lack of interest from broadcasters, who tend to know their audiences pretty well, sounding alarm bells for companies and corporations. 6 months out from the tournament, FIFA only had one confirmed Club World Cup sponsor, and that was the partially state-owned Chinese electronics firm Hisense, who have been regular FIFA sponsors since the 2018 World Cup. It was annexations for FIFA by this once, as Infantino's Junior's event. The European Players Union also filed a lawsuit against FIFA at Brussels' Court of Commerce in June, challenging the legality of FIFA's decisions to unilaterally set the international calendar and, in particular, the decision to create and schedule the FIFA Club World Cup 2025. End quote. It was during this time of crisis last October, unsurprisingly, that Messi's Inter Miami were confirmed as surprise Club World Cup participants. That still didn't work though. Interest from broadcasters ranged from tepid to non-existent. In the UK, for example, the BBC and ITV, the 2 largest television networks, who have the rights to and broadcast the actual World Cup every 4 years, didn't even make bids to televise the Club World Cup. In December, during the same week that the FIFA Club World Cup draw was held, Infantino announced that the British streaming service DAZN had acquired the tournament's broadcasting rights for $1 billion. As per the terms of the Club World Cup will be free to air on DAZN. FIFA, frankly, to give their use, that no one would watch if they attempted to paywall the competition before it had established any kind of cultural cachet, and it was also an attempt to reassure potential sponsors that it would be widely accessible at people. But as the deal was fundamental, as it provided sponsors by a $1 billion price tag, it was essential giving European clubs to take part. Once again, it was an extremely timely and convenient intervention. And also, once again, and you're not going to believe this, it was a deeply suspicious one. 2 months before the deal was struck, this outreach had agreement with Saudi Arabia's and the rights of the country's re-investments, amidst rumours that Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Authority, or PIF, were considering making an investment in the town. 2 months after the World Cup deal was struck, it was revealed that Saudi Arabia's Surge Sports Investments, a subsidiary of Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Authority, as the sporting wing of the country's soccer development, invested, you guessed it, Exactly $1 billion in the town, in exchange for a single-digit percentage ownership stake in the streaming service, which has lost over $1 billion a year every year since 2019, reported as being less than 5%. So, just as the club market appeared to be on the verge of collapse, with few traditional broadcasters expressing some interest, the Saudi state, who FIFA had never transferred to invested $1 million in the company, which then paid $1 million for the tournament's broadcasting rights, which is also the exact value of the tournament's $1 billion prize money. The shamelessness and transparency of Infantino's presidency genuinely beggars belief. Say what you want about Sepp Blatter. No, really, do say what you want. He was, and still is, a despicable toad. But at least the FIFA of his era had the good grace to operate through offshore accounts and companies to try and disguise their actions. This malignant slaphead practically goes around advertising it. In case the Saudi state's investing $1 billion in a company, within months of it paying $1 million in the club welfare's broadcasting rights, when the tournament's prize money is also worth exactly $1 million, wasn't blatant enough. And let's be clear, it was. So, Saudi Arabia's state-owned energy giant Saudi Aramco also became FIFA's new major worldwide partner until 2027, including sponsorship rights for both the 2026 World Cup and the 2027 Women's World Cup. And just in case that still wasn't too on the nose, a few days ago, so literally days before the start of the tournament, Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, PIF,